picking it up right from the start, again, if you just joined us or if you're just hearing us, this is the first episode of Talking TSR, where old school meets new. And Chris and I'm Rick Maffei. I'm here with Chris Boyle. And we're going to be talking about what the show is about. We're going to talk about our backgrounds very briefly, and then we're going to dive right into the subject matter and talk about our top 5 picks for classic adventure module series of all time.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Rick. So hopefully our audio is finally good now. Like I said, this is our first episode, so we're learning as we go along. We're going to kick this off with everybody out there probably wants to know who the heck Rick and Chris are. So we're going to kick that off with a little bit of introduction, and we're going to do that kind of interview back and forth. So I'm going to kick things started off with Rick here. So Rick, when did you first start playing Dungeons & Dragons?
I first started playing in the 1980s. I saw an article in Parade magazine, and it talked about this really weird craze that was sweeping through college campuses. And if you recall, D&D when it first came out was considered more of a college game. It was kind of aimed at that bracket, or it was being played by that bracket. And I saw this article, and it had pictures of people dressed up in medieval garb, and it had pictures of weird dice I had never seen and little figures, and it just looked interesting. It looked like nothing I had ever seen before. So I resolved to track this game down and find out what it was about, because I've always been a lover of games. And it took about a year, but eventually I found the books and started a very long journey.
Great. All right, so the chats are still keep coming in here, which is great. Thanks everybody for letting us know that the sound is good. Michael
Thanks,
Little at 10:08. Hi, back to you. All right, next question, Rick. So you've obviously been working in the industry for a while. What was your first publication?
First true publication, that is, I would say my first published adventure, was in Dungeon Magazine. I had other things, little things published, but that was really the first kind of big thing I had. I had an adventure called Training Ground, published in Dungeon Magazine. And it was a little bit of an adventure going back and forth with Dungeon, getting that done, because Dungeon Magazine was in a little bit of a transition period, and editors were switching, and a lot of things going on at the time. But yeah, that was my first one.
Great. Could it have anything to do with a certain bankruptcy suit that was going on?
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a tiny bit? All right, so here's a really cool story. Tell me about the Inn of the Sleeping Dragon contest in Dragon Magazine. This is
okay.
Great.
Yeah, this is really fun, folks. I did not participate in many contests back in the day. It just wasn't my nature. But Dragon Magazine had, I believe in issue 251, Dragon Magazine had a contest, the Inn of the Sleeping Dragon. And the idea was you'd submit 2,000 words or so, and you'd talk about it. You'd create your own inn. And Dragon and Dungeon magazines would pick their favorite submission. And that would become the official inn of the two magazines, and it would be featured in the magazines going forward and published and all that sort of thing. So I submitted, and I recalled that I was a runner-up. But the really, funny thing is, I had mentioned this to Chris maybe 3 days ago when we were kind of discussing this show. We were talking about some of our old war stories in the industry. And I mentioned to Chris that, I was runner-up in this Sleeping Dragon Inn contest. And then after I mentioned it to Chris, I decided I'm going to go on the, hit Google and find that little blurb that mentioned that I was runner-up and just read what it had to say about this contest. And I found this little blurb, and it announced the winner of the contest and the 3 runners-up. And Chris and I are both listed in the, there it is, there's the graphic.
Yep. You got the graphic up there.
Yeah. So if you could read that, if you look at the part that says Sleeping Dragon Inn, Chris and I are actually both listed as runners-up in this contest, and this is well before
we ever met.
Yeah, well before we ever met. I think that was in the very late 90s. That was about 21 years ago. So I believe that was 1998 or 1999, that issue. That would be Dragon 256. So, crazy.
All
Synchronicity.
right, so fast forward a little bit here. So now you're working for Goodman Games. When was your first publication for Goodman Games?
Yes. First publication for Goodman Games, I'm going to say 2005. I walked into a bookstore, long story short, saw the Dungeon Crawl Classics line, and I saw the blue maps and I saw the presentation, and I just said, this guy gets it. He's doing the classic look, he's doing the classic feel. I loved it. So I kind of got over any hesitation I had about submitting, and I just submitted an adventure, and that adventure went on to become The Scaly God, and I'm happy to say it was published and started a kind of very long relationship between me and Goodman Games. And yeah, the rest was history.
Great. And what have you recently been working on for Goodman Games?
Okay, recent. I have worked on 5th edition Fantasy, which is Goodman Games' 5th edition line. I've worked on some Call of Cthulhu items, and then very recently now, I'm super excited because I'm working on the Aura, what we call the Aura line at Goodman Games, which is the Original Adventures Reincarnated line, which are these nice big books in which we're basically taking classic modules. There we go. The exact same modules that we're talking about on the show. And we're taking select modules and translating them for 5th edition. And also, scanning them and presenting them in books in a kind of collector's fashion. And yeah, it's really cool books, and I'm psyched to be part of it.
Great, thanks. Comments still keep flying in. Wendell is in. Apparently you met me at GaryCon. Cheers. I'm glad to have met you. It's been a couple of years since I've been there. But yeah, so thanks a lot. We appreciate that shout out. All right, we'll pass it over to you, Rick.
Yeah, why don't I bounce it right back to you, Chris? When did you start playing D&D?
All right, I started playing D&D. I have a exact date, because there was a story behind this. February 2nd, 1981. And everybody's like, wow, how can you actually get a date? It's arbitrary. I just assigned that date, but that is the date when I got home from school. And I remember this day clearly. As I walked into the dining room, there was my box set, fresh from Sears Roebuck Company, and it was sitting there. The basic set. It was the Mulvey version with the Errol Otis artwork, the purple one with the dragon and the fighter and the wizard. But I really remember the day specifically because it was the day that my niece was born, and I became an uncle when I was in 5th grade. So I was 11 years old, and I became an uncle. And I walked into the house, and my mom said, "Great news." And I said, "What?" And I thought she was referring to the box set sitting on the table, but no, she said, "You're an uncle. Your niece was born." I said, "Awesome." And then I dove into that box set and started looking at all the books and everything. I had played D&D before that with some friends, but that's the date that I arbitrarily picked, mostly because it was the birthday of my niece. I figured I'd never forget that date. So.
Cool. Now, I know you've told me personally some stories about your early days in the industry. So just tell me, give me a segment of your early days.
Well, I started actually in the RPGA, which was TSR's club, if you will, International Club of Gamers, and they needed folks to design adventures, so I designed adventures for them, and then that led eventually to me being published in 1991. So I'm closing in on 30 years published in the industry. That was my first adventure in issue number 63, Crisis in the Cragmores. Some guy did the cover called Gerald Brom. I think he went on to do some pretty cool stuff in the industry after that. And then shortly after that, probably a couple of years after that, I was trying very hard to get published in Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine, but that was not a quick process at all. But then eventually I was published with West End Games. I am a huge Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
And West End Games was about 2 hours located from where I lived in New Jersey. So actually I struck up a friendship with them at conventions and eventually got my first writing gig through them. And so technically my first couple of publications, I could say I worked for George Lucas because they were basically a contractor. And then I went on to do, I did finally get published in Dungeon Magazine almost exactly the same time when you did, issue number 63, which was delayed a couple of years because of a certain bankruptcy suit. But yeah, and then I work for a couple other companies as well.
I'm definitely sensing a synchronicity here. Now, you've worked on, I mean, again, that kind of being the first that many years ago, you've worked on a lot of RPG books. And I've worked on a lot, but you've worked on even many more than me. Is there any project you've worked on that is super memorable to you, your most memorable project?
Well, I definitely have to say Castle White Rock for Goodman Games. The massive 700-page mega dungeon, greatest dungeon story ever told, so they say. So definitely that one was just a labor of love, and that was it was just fantastic putting that together and kind of being the organizer. And I did have a cohort helping me with that. Shout out to Adrian wherever you are. I think he's out in Phoenix somewhere. And then the other one would have to be definitely working on the ore line, the very first one into the Borderlands, being able to convert B1 and B2, two of some of the more classic adventures ever written. One written by Mr. Gygax himself. That was just an honor to be part of the legacy of that tremendous module. And yeah, and in each of them too, and more recently, working on a Temple of Elemental Evil has been quite an achievement as well. That one, achievement in different levels, because that I'm leading an entire team of designers on that one, and that one's a beast. That one is a beast.
Yes, it is. So that kind of leads me into my last question. So your primary responsibility, I guess we should say at Goodman Games right now, is you're focused on the ore line.
Yes, very much so, and also the 5th edition fantasies, as we trickle some of them out as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, that's been consuming me. I do have a regular job in the real world, so this is labor love. This is down in the basement on weekends and at nights, and definitely it's not my primary job or even source of income. So it's a little bit harder to do things than it was back in the 90s when I had a lot more free time.
Cool. I see we have a comment.
We got a big comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me the balls. Got White Rock just to marvel at it. There you go.
Yeah, I marveled at it too. So I guess we should tell them a little bit about the show segments, what we're planning to cover. Maybe not every show, but the kind of things we'll be going over.
Yeah. I think it's a great opportunity. So we're just going to give you guys kind of a little thumbnail sketch of what the show is going to be about. We're going to do a bunch of these little short segments. Not every show is going to have all these segments. We're going to mix it up and everything. We're going to hopefully, do a couple of different things. We're going to see what sticks after we do a couple of episodes, get some feedback from you guys, and see what works. So definitely, send comments to us during the show, after the show. Reach out to us via the Goodman Games forums. So let's kick off some of the brief description of what some of the segments are going to be. Take it away, Rick.
Sure. Well, one of our subjects, as we have mentioned, the ore line, is we are going to be talking about the original Adventures Reincarnated line because it connects directly with the old books. One of our kind of goals, I think, Chris and I, for this show is, we want to talk about these books we love from the past and look at these classic adventure modules. But then so many things have changed between now and when these were published originally back in the 70s or the 80s, and now gaming has changed somewhat. So we want to see what lessons we can carry forward and how they influence 5th edition. And the original Adventures Reincarnated line really kind of bridges that gap between old and new. So we're going to be looking at both aspects, and in certain shows we're going to be delving into our design process. So like right now we're working on the Temple of Elemental Evil in the Village of Hamlet, that series. And we want to be able to talk a little more in depth about what our design process is as we go into these ore books, or what Chris's design process was when he went into like the Keep of the Borderlands. How to translate that into 5th edition and overcome some of those translation issues or modern gaming tropes and translate things over.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So the next thing we're going to do is, the internet loves top 5 and top 10 lists. And we love them too, to be honest with you. I mean, they're a great talking point, a great controversial They're just a lot of fun to do, and there's no right or wrong answer. That's why they're so good. So one of the things we're going to feature are our own top 5, top 10 lists. This is a great opportunity for you guys to throw us some suggestions on what you guys would like to see in future ones. We have a list already, but we'll definitely solicit additional ones from other folks. And we do have a top 5 list that's going to come up shortly later on in this episode. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the fun part. The most fun part is the top 5 list, to be sure. We're also planning to have the occasional kind of guest on our show. So the show, depending on what we cover, we might bring in past authors or people from the industry or people we've worked with to discuss various themes or projects or old classic books. So that's something you can expect in some future shows. We're already thinking about a guest star in a show coming up, so I think that's be coming right around the pike.
That sounds good. We're going to do our best to see if we can try and get some interviews. I see we mentioned top 5, top 10 lists and everything, and all of a sudden people are starting to comment here. So, and that's a great question. Before we jump a little bit further about if our top 5 list has changed over the year, I would say they do change a little bit. Even though the modules haven't changed, sometimes you rediscover things all the time. That's what's great about the OR line. Sometimes you forget about certain modules, and you're like, hey, I should really pick that one up again and take a look at it and see what made me like that way back in the 70s. So our next show segment, we're going to call Advantage, Disadvantage. So obviously in 5th edition, one of the core mechanics of 5th edition is advantage, disadvantage. So we figured that would be we'll come up with a talking point, and we'll try and give you a couple different angles, a couple different sides of the story of what that point is. It could be a rule, it could be a particular play style, it could be some kind of props that you use during the game, something, and it will just kind of kick the can down the street a little bit on that, and then at the end kind of tie it all up with is it advantage, disadvantage, is it a good thing, bad thing. So that's going to be one of our segments as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something really good and maybe controversial in a good way. And then, of course, as we're trying to do now, we're going to look at the comments that are streaming in during our broadcast. And you're always welcome to submit any questions, and we'll try to tackle them during the show. If questions are of the sort that we can't address right immediately during the show, we'll try to circle back and address them in the next show. Or if you see this video archived on Twitch, or you view it later on YouTube, for instance, you can always leave a comment or a question in the YouTube comments, and we will read those as well. And again, we'll circle around and address your comments. We want this to be a very organic process. So we will be shaping the show and answering your questions based a lot on your feedback.
Yeah, and again, already getting some love here. We got suggestion top 5 UK modules. Yeah, love that idea. That one's going to happen. That one's definitely going to happen.
Definitely. There were a lot of good UK modules that I feel like were overlooked. So excellent suggestion.
There were some great ones. All right, and our last segment that we have planned for at least our first season is going to be this is going to wrap our show each time. We're calling this the Pearl of Wisdom. Now, if you're old school first edition gamers out there, remember there was a magic item called the Pearl of Wisdom. And that's what this is. This is going to be a nugget or something useful. Hopefully it's going to kind of tie into the theme of the show, or it's just going to be something that we kind of come up with just to kind of put a bow on things. And it was ironic when we were kicking this idea around when we were doing our prep for the show. We were like, well, we got to name it something. And we're like, oh, well, let's call it the Pearl of Wisdom. And then I whipped out my 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and there is no Pearl of Wisdom in 5th edition. So, but don't worry, we were surprised about that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later once we get to our show wrap and everything. All right, so that's the segments that we have. I think we are good to go. I think we're getting ready to jump into our top 5 list for this episode. So why don't you kick us off, Brent?
All right, let's go right into it. We are looking at our top 5 module series. So we're looking at the original TSR modules, and we're looking at adventures that go in sequence. That is, adventures that connect together. Now, I don't know if Chris and I follow the exact same rules as to how big a series we can cover or what kind of mega books we can cover.
We did not. Actually, let's just tell the viewers there are no rules to this.
Yeah.
We're making these rules up. We have not shared the list between us, so we don't know what they are.
I don't know.
And we don't have, my list might be completely different than Rick's list. We're just going to have fun with it. And we're going to talk about it and give the rationale and everything. So
there we go.
All right. Why don't you kick it off with number 5, Rick?
All right. My number 5 was the Saltmarsh series. That is the U1 to 3, The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, Danger at Dunwater, and The Final Enemy. That would be my number 5. I thought it was a really fun series. I think The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh in particular is a great module. I think it's a really good beginner module. I think for new Dungeon Masters, I think for new players. I recently, this year or last year, even ran it for a mixed group of adults and children, including my son and the kids who really hadn't played a lot of D&D and kind of poking around that haunted mansion, uncovering clues. It's a great beginner module, I think. So, and then of course, then eventually it gets into the Undersea and the Sahuagin and all that. And I don't know, it's a favorite of mine. So yeah, that is my number 5. So what's your number 5, Chris?
All right. Well, I would like to comment on that. I mean, Saltmarsh, yeah, I might want to talk about that a little bit later on my list. And it's good when Wizards of the Coast republishes it for 5th edition, and that was a sad day actually when I saw that announcement, because that was one I had circled on my list of ones that I wanted to convert for Goodman Games, but unfortunately that will not happen. Which is sad, but still great set of modules. So my number 5. So my list is probably going to be a little controversial, and I was looking at trying to mix things up a little bit. I didn't want to go chalk and everything. So, and I actually got the modules with me. So for my number 5, I went with the Lendor Isle series. So that would be L1. Hopefully, let's see if we can see this. L1, nice. L2, and actually L3. L1 was The Secret of Bone Hill. And there we go there. And L2 was The Assassin's Knot. And L3 has an interesting kind of backstory, kind of the weakest of the 3 in my opinion. Deep Dwarven Delve. But I'll get to these. I loved Secret of Bone Hill. First of all, who doesn't love that artwork when you're 11 years old? I mean, that will just jump out at you. You know what I mean? And let's see, we'll get the cover of Assassin's Knot there. But Secret of Bone Hill, not the greatest adventure in the world, but it was probably the first sandbox adventure that I discovered, and that fascinated me. It fascinated me that you could have simply a setting, a hexcrawl setting, if you will, and it could have a bunch of little adventure sites in it. And it was just fascinating. There were all little different sites. There was some really cool undead, different undead. There was the Ghoul Sturge in there, which was fascinating, and I've reskinned that and put that in one of my modules. Absolutely, it was very, very evocative, I thought. And then it had a fully designed castle. I wasn't really sure what to do with that castle, but it was there for me, and I'm sure I used that castle other times to kind of inspire when I was doing a castle. And then as far as L2, The Assassin's Knot, it was a murder mystery. I mean, it was all about NPCs. It was all about role-playing. Again, one of those watershed moments where you're like, wow, this game, there's so many levels you can play this game on. It's not just going in and kicking goblins, but you can go do a murder mystery, and it was fast. I never run Assassin's Knot, probably because back then I was just scared to, but it was phenomenal. It had a timeline so that if you weren't solving the mystery fast enough, like more bad things were happening. That was fascinating to read that and kind of wrap your head around that as a game master. And most folks probably don't know about L3. L3 was actually originally written by Len Lekovka. I can't get his name. Lekovka. think his name is. He wrote all three of the modules. He wrote L3 in 1979. It was kind of the lost manuscript, and it never got published. And then back in, I'm trying to think of the year. I think it was, I got it written down in my notes. I can just look right at my notes. Back in 1999, when they were celebrating the 25th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, they put out the silver anniversary box set, and they finally published L3. I still don't have a physical copy of it. I just have a PDF copy of it. It was called Deep Dwarven Delve, and it was a dwarven Moria kind of go in and kick monster butts. It wasn't as thought provoking as the other ones, but I liked it also that it was just the same author for all three. That's my number 5.
That's cool, and I think that series actually really has potential to be a base of operations, or to give the DM a good example of base of operations. And last I saw, Len was actually still kind of producing some material online that's available if you look for it. I think with the Dragonfoot folks and some other venues. So
yeah, I think he actually did a 4th in the series, if I'm not mistaken.
So it's nice to see at least one classic author is still churning out material. It gets under your skin. So I guess jumping into my number 4 would be T1 to 4, though I really look at it as 2 books, being The Village of Hamlet and The Temple of Elemental Evil, which really dovetails nicely into the fact that I'm working on that now, and it's one of the reasons I was so psyched to be working on the 5th edition kind of conversion of Temple of Elemental Evil for the Ore line. Is we touched on this on our broadcast at Cyclops Con, but the 6-year gap in between those 2 books, it only kind of heightened things and got me excited. There we go. We have a comment. Woohoo! I agree, Thick Skull. Yeah, because it was
Thick Skull, liking your list so far.
Yes, I'm digging your taste, Thick Skull. It was such a gap in between products, and it just heightened the excitement for when the Temple finally came out. And then when the Temple came, it was just such a mega opus. And it's a good, solid series in that you have a great investigative, low-key base of operations written by Gygax in the Village of Hamlet, and then it connects very directly to the Temple of Elemental Evil. And even though it's 2 books, I feel like there's a lot of material there.
I can attest that there's a lot of material there.
Yeah, I think we both can attest at this point that there's a lot of material there now that we're working on it. But that is my number 4. And Thick Skull is commenting that he's curious. We know how much is written by Gygax versus Mincer. We're translating all of it, but I think there's. Chris, I'd like you to chime in here too, but I think it's very blurry in areas who wrote what, frankly.
Yeah, from what I understand, Gygax wrote T1, Village of Hamlet, and the Ruined Moat House, and he had extensive notes on the rest, T2, the Temple of Elemental Evil, and legend has it, and again, I'm not sure this is exactly true or not, but when Gygax came back from the West Coast to kind of save TSR back in 1985 because they were having some issues, he pushed out a bunch of products, and one of the products that he pushed out was Temple of Elemental Evil 6 years after T1 had come out. And from what I understand, he turned all of his notes over to Frank Mentzer, and Frank was the one that basically brought it home. So I think Frank did most of the Temple of Elemental Evil, but because I think he was the only person that Gary trusted to take his notes and turn it into something. So, but yes, that's probably a great question for one of the old grognards at GaryCon that might be in the know, or one of the true historians of gamer lore. So. All right, my number 4 is, okay, I kind of cheated on this one a little bit. I'm taking 7 modules at once.
Oh, no, I knew it.
Yeah, Queen of the Spiders, GDQ 1 through 7. Yeah, there's a little bit of a cop-out because I can get so many in here in one shot. These are really, really classic. All of them written by Gary Gygax. And except for I think Q1, I think he had somebody was a co-author with him on that. But again, amazing on what you could do in such a short number of pages, especially the G's, G1, 2, and 3. Yes, you're just going in and kicking giant butt, but there was some story there, and there was some leading into the next one, and just 3 different dynamic settings, and then the reveal of the Drow, and then the Underdark. Phenomenal, and yeah, I mean, I know D1's got some issues with some of the encounters. I'm looking at you, Lich, in an alcove, and a purple worm next door, and then some bugbears, but just classic. And then you get to one of my favorites of the whole series is D2, the Shrine of the Kuatella. I love slimy fish guys, and that whole shrine was amazing. The scope of it, the size of it, was just phenomenal. And just that map just inspired me, and the underground maps, and then D3, again, another sandbox. You can see kind of a theme here. I like the sandboxes. Here's a city, an entire city, and we're just going to give you some notes on its kitchen, and it's up to you and your imagination to run wild. And that's exactly what I did with it. It was phenomenal. Now I will admit, Q1 not my favorite. If people know me, I do not like my fantasy mixed with my science fiction. And Q1 featured a spider ship at the end there that the theme that the Queen of Spiders was in. So not my favorite. But that's everybody's to each their own. I just like my fantasy to be fantasy, and I like my sci-fi preferably be Star Wars. So that's how we go on that. So that was my number 4, GDQ 1 through 7. I admit it, it's a cop out, but feel free to take me to task there, Rick.
I might be touching on one or more of those.
Okay, good.
So for future reference in the ore line, if I design a room where a lich is just reclining in a cave, that's no good, huh? All right.
No, that's not good. That will get severely revised. I'll tell you that.
Taken for future notice. Jumping into my number 3, I'm going to go with the Desert of Desolation series. That is, I believe it's I3 to 5. It's Pharaoh, Oasis of the White Palm, and the Lost Tomb of Martek. And this would be the first module, Pharaoh. And it also came out in a nice little compilation as well, with a Sphinx on the cover, or a Pharaoh on the cover, if I recall. So yeah, I should leave that up there for a little bit instead of my face. But I thought this was a great series. To me, I think any DM eventually wants to give a stab at the Egyptian genre. You're eventually going to say, let's do that pyramid thing. Let's get the mummy out of the monster manual, throw him in there, and get, because you don't usually have, at least in my campaigns, mummies usually aren't running around in the temperate zones. And it's one of those genres where I've seen a lot of pyramid modules, and a lot of people have given it a shot, but this was one where I thought Pharaoh was really well done. And talk about getting bang for the buck. Just in Pharaoh alone, there's so much material, and there's so many little mini dungeons. But over the 3 module series, there's an enormous amount of material there, and interesting material. Somehow, the whole campaign, they managed to keep giving you new and different encounters, and some kind of really cool way out encounters. There's sort of like a sea of glass that you could even kind of sail across in these unusual ships and things, but then there's very traditional tomb exploration. And I think you could easily get play sessions in the double digits out of this series of 3 modules. So that's a definite number 3. I think a solid number 3 entry for me.
Yeah, there's a good chance that one might be showing up on my list. So I could not disagree at all with you on that. That is really good. And once again, Thick Skull is loving your suggestions here. Totally. And 1965. No, we're not doing any Gamma World discussions this week. But maybe we will do a topic. I have to admit, not really in my wheelhouse, but it is not to say that we can't find somebody who could be. So,
I'll work on it.
Okay, all right. Easy
I
to work
used to
on.
play Gamma World back in the day, so
Oh, nice, nice.
not that I
All
don't
right.
want to mix too much peanut butter in our chocolate, but perhaps.
All right, my number three, again, maybe a little bit cheating and everything, but I'm going to go with Against the Slave Lords or Scourge of the Slave Lords or the Slaver series, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to actually throw in a bonus one here. I'm going to throw in A0. For those of you who know what A0 is, that's Danger at Dark Shelf Quarry. Talk about that in a second. But these are amazing, amazing modules. Amazing from the fact that they were originally tournament modules. I believe it was at Gen Con 8. And they were also published. They were actually published after they were used as tournament modules back in the early 80s, 1980 for A1 and 1981, I believe, for the other three modules. Hard to believe that the other three all came out in the same year. Um, but I just, each one had yes, they're a little humanoid heavy and everything, but the slave lords were just like great villains. And they just carried it all the way through. You just had dynamic settings. You had slave pits of the Undercity A1, which was just sewers and a ruined temple in an evil city. A2, a stockade out kind of in the wilderness, which is more of a stealthy kind of an operation of get in, get out, which is phenomenal. And then some dungeons at the bottom of that. A3 was, probably the weakest of the three modules, and I will admit a little railroady there, especially at the end. But they had the railroad you with the setup to get to the payoff, which was A4, which is amazing. Just a phenomenal module. You start captured with no weapons, no equipment, no spell components, and you just have to use your wits to escape the dungeons, and then actually escape the island. It inspired one of the 5th edition fantasies that I wrote. Just an amazing module. Amazing that it was 4 different authors, 5 different authors if you throw in A0. So A0, Danger at Dark Shelf Quarry, written by Skip Williams. So that was published actually in 2000, and I'm looking at my notes and I don't see it. 2013, I believe it is. When Wizards of the Coast was reprinting the books in hardcover, they actually had Skip Williams, who was definitely an old school author, write a 1st edition module, a prequel, if you will, to the Slaver series. And that was labeled A0. It was for levels 1 through 3. And it's a pretty good module. It fits the theme of the other modules. And again, originally those 4 modules, they were tournament modules, right? Writing, and I know a little bit about writing tournament modules. Tournament modules are completely different to campaign modules. Yeah. And the reprint in 1986 of Scourge of the Slave Lords, where they really kind of fleshed out and kind of bridged the gap in between, they did a fantastic job in there, and many, many sessions in there. And you just, in my opinion, you can't go wrong. And also, they actually took the time to include the scoring system in the modules, and that scoring system directly inspired myself and Goodman Games to create the scoring system for their original DCC tournament, and now for the DCC RPG tournament that they've got going on now. So I thank them for including those scoring sheets in there and giving us a little glimpse for those of us who weren't at Gen Con 8, just what that was all about.
Cool.
And we do have a comment there. Yep, the tournament stuff, a waste of time. Yeah, but the page count was short. But the scoring was good. But I have to admit, when you were reading the module, the fact you were like, it was very linear and railroady. But that's the way tournament modules are. So it's good to see that other side of the on the other side of the curtain there.
Well, you gave me an easy segue to my number 2, Chris, because my number 2 pick is the Scourge of the Slave Lords series.
There you go.
Without a doubt. I loved the Slave Pits of the Undercity. I think it's a fun, you've got a weird, abandoned temple, you've got orcs running around, you've got sewer encounters, you've got pits and things that have to be jumped over, like, what's not to like. And then the Secret of the Slaver's Stockade, I thought was also really fun, because you just got all these rooms with humanoids, and you have a case where there's really a lot of creativity, I thought, in the individual rooms. There's a room with a fake ghost where the humanoids set up a sort of fake spirit, and different things going on, and it could have been a very boring stockade, and it's not. It's a fun, living, feeling place. You took the words right out of my mouth. I think, and I was even going to mention this, that I do think A3, the Airy, is the weakest of the three. I like. There was like a little salt slide. I like that. I thought there was a few little touches that were
Remember
fun.
the salt slide.
Remember the salt slide?
You could take the doors off and use them as rafts, if I believe.
Yeah. Down. I mean, that was kind of okay. I was like, where did that come from? But I remember feeling that that was always kind of the weakest. And then the last, which I'm going to say is in the Dungeons of the Slave Lords, I believe is the name of that module. That one, it screams tournament. Was literally kind of take all your equipment away, throw the characters in a dungeon, and now your players have to really use their wits and any little bits, and if they find a few splinters of wood, that becomes a dagger, and they have to, they're interacting with giant ants, and there's a few false scares like quivering roots. I remember in one room that people might think are plant creature or something, and really kind of pushes the players to do with almost nothing. And then when the players finally get out of the dungeon, it kind of, if you remember, leads up to this great climax where you're literally like on an island and the volcano's blowing up, and it's very James Bond. You feel like the whole place is collapsing, and the characters have to race for the boats, where of course the ultimate bad guys are waiting. And I tortured quite a few players with this series over the years, and touching on the big book, the revised set, I think they did a really good job with the revised set. There's good extra material in there. There's good bridging material. So that's a case where, again, something I try to think in my mind and emulate with our ore line is something where they've taken an original series of modules which were really good and made them even better. It's kind of like a good cover song. They've taken it and just,
well, there was a real all-star cast of folks that were working on that. And the nice thing about it was a lot of the original authors were still around, so they were also part of the project too. So you really had a lot of synergy work in there. So great.
Good product. So you're number one.
Number two. I'm on number two.
Oh, you're on number two. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, number two. All right. My number two is, you've already heard it, the Desert of Desolation series. I love this series to pieces. You touched on most of it, but I think my favorite one is definitely the first one, the Egyptian pyramid, because you're right, I love all kinds of things Egyptian. The traps in this module were just well thought out and amazing. I mean, it felt like they pulled them from the Grimtooth Traps book. Dusty tombs, curses, you had it all in there, and lots of little, and color artwork. And you had a lot of little, you had the big sprawling pyramid complex, but then you had a lot of other smaller sites too. Again, a little bit of a sandbox, no pun intended there. And then just a phenomenal story that kind of went in three parts, and it was great. It was definitely, I remember playing it the one time we ran through the whole way. It was a lot of sessions to get through that. I mean, it was probably at least 10 sessions to get through that, if not more. And the Sea of Glass was just amazing. I mean, that was awe-inspiring, just to think about ships basically on big ice blade ships, bladed ships at the bottom, just, and raiders. Just phenomenal. Just really caught the tone and everything. I really enjoyed the original three modules, and then recently, probably about 5-6 years ago, I picked up the expanded edition. It was one of those things I've been always trying to look for at Gen Con. Finally got a beat-up old copy. It's got pen writing in it and everything, but I didn't care because I wanted to read it cover to cover. And they did a great job. And right in the foreword, the guy who actually did the expansion, this is something I've really taken to heart, is he expanded the original, fleshed it out, but he really kept the same tone. And that is basically our design philosophy for the ore line. It's basically to take the classics, not redo the classics and make them better, because you're not going to make them better, but it's to bring them up for the modern gamer to use, but keep that original tone, that first edition kind of tone and feel and vernacular. And that's really inspired me along. And the timing about that, when I finally got that super module, was probably right around the time when I was jumping into into the Borderlands, so the timing was perfect. So that's my number 2. All right, can't wait to hear your number 1.
Here we go. Dun, dun, dun. All right, you might have suspected already, but my number 1, and I did stick with 3. I restricted myself. Is the Giant series. That is Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. And these are my originals, by the way. Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. You can see I've even got the monochromes here.
Monochrome ones, yeah.
All of the Fire Giant King. Now, as you touched on earlier, and it's a really good point, these are short. I mean, I think all 3 of these, well, maybe not the Fire Giant. Let me look here. They're all like 8 pages apiece.
Yep.
And there's so much in those 8 pages. It kind of blows my mind as a designer, because to me, the idea of a Giants thing isn't something that I would normally find super exciting. And certainly not at the time I bought these modules. Oh, you're going to go fight some Giants. It didn't sound like something that, would set your teeth on edge. And then when you actually read into the books, though, I think they're so wonderfully done. It's classic Gygax. Each module has its own flavor. The kind of stockade where the Hill Giants are is completely different in feel than the Glacial Rift, where there's a lot of icicles and hazards and a lot more wild creatures wandering around the Glacial Rift. And then when you get to the Fire Giants, it's a more complicated, very classic to me dungeon with all the kind of dungeon food groups in there, and literally a dragon at the end, and even the introduction to the Drow, or as I call them, the Drow. And as a side note, a friend and I once at a very old Gen Con actually cornered Gary Gygax himself in a bar in the Lake Geneva area. And we asked him about the pronunciation of Drow versus Drow. And he said he always says Drow, but he was okay with my saying Drow. So I have Gygax's blessing on that. I slip and I say Drow. But yeah, I think there are 3 great modules. I think the modules that came after those were just as good too. I think the whole series is really good. Q1, like you, Q1 was a little weird, science fiction-y for me. It did feel like another plane, so I guess that was good. But yeah, it there in Q1, I felt the difference in both author and the kind of shift from Gygax to another author and another tone. And it felt like a little bit of a jarring shift for me. But I love the G series. I love the D series. I love the whole series. But yeah, the 3 giant modules are my number 1, because I think Hall of the Fire Giant King is one of my top modules of all time.
Okay. And my number 1, not going to be much of a surprise, already mentioned, the Saltmarsh series.
There we go.
Yeah. So, and again, now there's a little bit of bias on this. In the real world, I am an aquatic biologist. I love everything that has to do with the water. So naturally, I'm going to like this. You won the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. I have run this module the most times in my career as a game master. I think 5 or 6 times. I'm not sure exactly if it's 5 or 6. Yes, it's a little Scooby-Doo-ish. Yes, it's a little, it's a haunted house. It's not really haunted. But it's great. The assaulting the smuggler ship in the second act is just phenomenal. That the Sea Ghost, the map of the Sea Ghost, just always inspired me. Almost every time I had a ship in a D&D module, it was inspired directly from that. Phenomenal. I loved U2, Danger at Dunwater. The fact that it was an entire lair of lizard men back in the day, but it was designed to not be combat heavy. You were not supposed to go in there and kick everybody's butt. And there were some rules in there about that. And it was phenomenal. It was really kind of, again, kind of made you think about the game and all the different things you could do with the game. And then the final enemy, because you were ready to kick some butt at that point, because you didn't kick any butt basically the whole second module in the second act, then you got it. And full underwater action. And, it was phenomenal. I loved it. The plot, the nautical theme. There were sea elves. Loved the sea elves. It was just it just checked off a bunch of boxes. And keep in mind, back in the day, 12, 13 years old, that's what it hit the sweet spot for me. I was watching Scooby-Doo back then. I'm sure I was. And it just felt like it was someone took a Scooby-Doo episode and made it into a module, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So yeah, a little bit of bias on that. Love it. I do want to mention a couple of honorable mentions that didn't make my list, and Rick, I'll throw it to you afterwards. But yeah, so T1 through 4 definitely was barking on the door. Would have been really easy for me to slot that in the number 5 spot, but I didn't. And then I have to do a shout out to, I know, one of my favorites, Egg of the Phoenix, which was originally a series, R1 through 4, very uncommon, very rare modules that were printed by the RPGA. I actually owned one of them and then sold it at an auction. So those are probably my honorable mentions. I thought really long and hard about putting them on the list, but I really wanted to go something a little different. So that's why I kind of threw the Lendor file on there, just because some of the fond memories and everything. So we had a shout out for Egg of the Phoenix early on. So throw that out there. So Rick, do you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I think the Lindora Isles would definitely be on there, and yeah, I think that would be kind of, if I'm thinking about my honorable mentions. I think that would be a good one. And again, props to the D series since I didn't mention it, but I restrained myself. But yeah, that whole series I love.
Excellent, great. So, well, that's it. That's our top 5 list, everybody. We hope you guys enjoyed that. We're probably going to do a fair amount of these top lists. They seem to be pretty popular based on the comments. Obviously, they're pretty popular. I already starting to think about a top 5 UK modules. That's a good one. I like that.
You've got the wheels turning here.
Certainly, yeah. So our show is coming to an end, and it looks like we're almost right on time for an hour, which is great. Nice. Despite with a little slow start there, we thank everybody for hanging through with us. Thank you guys for the questions throughout the entire show. We appreciate it. Keep them coming. We will try and get to them as we possibly can. And as we're going to end every show, we're going to give you the Pearl of Wisdom. And the Pearl of Wisdom this week is going to be very different.
Thank you.
So, like I said, the Pearl of Wisdom actually doesn't exist in 5th edition. So, what do a couple of designers do? So we went ahead and designed it. Hopefully there's going to be a graphic popping up soon. There we go. There's going to be our Pearl of Wisdom. So we went ahead and we designed a 5th edition version of the Pearl of Wisdom, and that will be included in the Temple of Elemental Evil, which is ore number 6. And I think we've got a graphic coming up for that. We're going to share that with you right now. So you guys are actually going to get a sneak peek, I should say, of what the 5th edition version of the Pearl of Wisdom is going to be. And there it is. So we'll leave that sit on there for a minute or two while we wrap the show up. When folks are watching this later on, they might want to pause the screen and actually take a look at that. But yes, so that is our Pearl of Wisdom for this week. It's the actual Pearl of Wisdom in 5th edition form. So I want to thank Rick. I think Rick's got a couple of announcements to make here at the end, but I want to thank Rick, and I want to thank Goodman Games for giving us the opportunity to do this show.
Yes, psyched to be doing this. Thanks to Joseph Goodman and Goodman Games. And yeah, thank you, Chris, for sharing that. You have to have the right person alongside you doing this kind of show, and you're it. If that old announcement in Dragon Magazine isn't, fate, I don't know what is. Real quick, our next show, we hope you'll join us again for our next show, because we're only going to get better if we have our way about it. Our next show is planned for June 14th. Now, that is the weekend of Goodman Games' second online convention, which is the DCC Days Online. So if you join us that next Sunday, we will be back. We will hopefully come back with another top 5 list. You've given us some good ideas. So I in particular am psyched. And I think that's it, right? As far as
I am as well. So everybody, everybody be safe out there, and keep those old school rules alive. Thanks a lot,
old
everybody.
School rules. Good night,
Have
folks.
a good night.